how my gay best friend screwed my boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 17 and in 11th grade whenever this all happened. But whenever I was in 5th grade, I had moved to a fairly large town. And ever since then, I had had the same group of friends, which were these 3 other girls, and then this guy named Louise, and then me, of course. Now, Louise decided to come out in 9th grade, so 2 years prior to this whole situation, and things were extremely hard on him. Even though the other girls and I, you know, tried to give him the utmost support that we could, all the guys in school pretty much hated him and they would bully him all the time. And then the girls in our school would just be fake nice to him because they thought it was cool to have a gay best friend. But they were all just like super mean. They would call him mean names. They would make homophobic comments towards him, just the whole 9 yards. Like, this kid really went through it. And you know, instead of just like sticking by what they said, whenever they needed something from him, he was still really nice, even though they were all assholes. They would just pretty much take advantage of how kind he was. Poor Louise. I don't know what it's like to be in that situation, but I could not imagine. Like, high school is already so hard as it is. Like, nobody needs that in their life. And not to mention, whenever there was a party being thrown, all of us girls would be invited. Louise wouldn't be invited. So one person from the friend group usually would stay behind and just comfort him. And it was typically me because I was like low-key closer with Louise. Like, I would say, you know, like all of us were very supportive of him, but I was the most supportive, if that makes sense. Like, you know, I would always be hyping him up whenever he looked good. Like, even when he didn't, you know, I would just always hype him up. And I would always, you know, encourage him to talk to his crushes and stuff. Just really trying to be the most supportive friend that I could be. It was like a real kind of like sister bond that him and I had, which was, I feel like, really good for him because he had no support at home either. Like, his parents were just assholes. They would always try to, quote, talk him out of being gay. Like, what the actual F? I don't know how that works, but good luck with that, sis. But they even kicked him out for a whole week whenever he came out. So he tried to spend as little time there as possible. And I don't blame them because the times that I had went over there, they even made me feel uncomfortable with some of the stuff that they would say. But enough about his trauma in his life. The one day, Louise had this amazing idea of us downloading Tinder. He was like, come on, like, we're 17, you know, we don't really go out that much. We need to start meeting new people, this, that, and the next. At first, I thought it was a bad idea, but then after a little convincing, I was like, you know what? Why not? YOLO, right? So we both made accounts and we made it so that way it said 18, of course. So after being on the app for about a week and matching with plenty of guys that I had absolutely no interest in, I matched with this one guy named Caleb. And this man was fine as fuck. He was super tall, super nice, and just overall extremely attractive. And when I told Louise about him, he was like, oh girl, like, you have to date him. Like, this is your man. So I did. Caleb and I would talk on FaceTime. We would text each other and Snapchat each other 24/7. And the best part was he was also 17. So it wasn't like I was dating some 30-year-old weirdo. But then again, they wouldn't be a weirdo because the app is for people who are over 18. You guys get the point. So we lived like 25 minutes away from each other. And after a few weeks of him and I just talking, we finally decided why not meet up. The first place that we met was a cafe restaurant type place, which I thought would be safe for our first time meeting. I did not want to bring him to my house, not knowing that much about him, because I feel like whenever you meet somebody in person, you really get their actual vibes, if that makes sense. Well, shortly after meeting in person, him and I decided to make things official. We both deleted our Tinders, and I thought I was extremely in love with this guy, even though it hadn't even been that long. Well, the first month or so was absolutely perfect, no complaints. He would take me on the best dates and just made me feel like I was the only girl in the world. Well, then after the first month, I would say I realized that every time that we hung out, he was spending a lot of time on his phone, which I know could have been anything. But for a person who does online school and, quote, doesn't have that many friends, He was Snapchatting and texting a lot. So then, who do I decide to ask for advice? I decide to ask Louise for advice, of course. He's my best friend. I was like, should I look on his phone when he goes out of the room? Like, what should I do? Like, sis was reading through every single option in the freaking book. And Louise, my bestie, tells me, oh, you're probably just overthinking things because you like him so much. I wouldn't worry about it. Don't do anything that could ruin your guys' relationship. How ironic. Louise, you sneaky little bastard. So, as anybody would, I was sad at first whenever Louise was not, like, giving me any advice. I mean, he did, but it was not best friend advice, you know? So even though I was upset, I still decided to go through with my plan, which was to find out who the fuck Caleb was texting 24/7. Who's more important than me? Nobody. Get it together. Well, the next time that I had went over to Caleb's, of course, his phone is going off profusely again. So this time I'm like, hey, like, who are you texting so much? And he's like, oh, just a friend from my old football team. And I'm like, oh, well, you know, maybe sometime you could introduce us, since you want to text them so much when we're together. So it totally, like, you know, flies over his head that I'm clearly upset and pissed off. And he just goes, oh, yeah, sure, babe. Well, every time for the next 2 weeks, whenever him and I were supposed to hang out, he canceled on me. So now I'm really suspicious that something is going on. And it didn't even, like, come to me that I also hadn't really seen Louise that much in the past 2 weeks. Anyways, so like I said, that thought was out the window. But now I'm thinking he has to be seeing another girl. So me being the crazy bitch that I am, I decide to go and buy a tile from the store and put it in his car. Cause why not? No, I didn't do it and like sneak over his house, you know, in the middle of the night. No. He saw me like once after school for probably like an hour, but he just decided to get a shower and get ready for something else. And while he did that, I went and put it in his car. Well, after a couple days, nothing was too suspicious. Nothing for me to really, you know, get upset over. Well, a few days later, he cancels plans on me again. And I want to say about 20 minutes later, I decide to check the map. And what do you know? He is outside of Louise's house. So I try calling Caleb, I get no response. I try calling Louise, I get no response. So I drive to Louise's house to see if they're there. But then I check the map again and they are back at Caleb's house. So I go, I knock on the door, I ask if Louise is there. They're like, no, he just left with a friend. So then I check the map again and they're at Caleb's house. And to be honest, I didn't really think that Louise was at Caleb's house just because I thought, you know, oh, maybe he had to drop something off to him or something like that. You know, I didn't even really think that they were friends. So I go to Caleb's house. His mom lets me in. She doesn't even know that there's a friend there with him. A friend. And by the way, Caleb's excuse was that he had to drive his mom to work, which was an hour away. Well, I go down to the basement and while I'm running down there at the bottom of the stairs, I see Louise's shoes. And I never thought that Louise would do, like, you know, anything to damage our friendship. So I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, like, why wouldn't they tell me that they're hanging out? Like, the stupid bitch that I am. So at this point, I decide that I might as well just surprise them. And I run down the stairs, barge open into the room. Next thing I know, I see Caleb and Louise scrambling to put their clothes back on. I was in so much shock that I, like, knocked over his fucking $4,000 computer. And I was screaming and then I stormed out of the house and then all I could hear as I was leaving was his mom screaming at him. So that night I told all the girls what happened and we all came to a unanimous decision that we no longer wanted to be friends with him. So they blocked him, as they should. And I didn't block him because I wanted to see if he would text me if he had anything to say for himself. But of course he didn't because he's a coward. But Louise and Caleb continued to date. But I ended up hearing some tea about Louise transferring schools because the bullying got extremely bad, and for like a month his parents like weren't gonna allow him to transfer schools unless he tried to stay in that environment and see if things would get better. But it didn't, because he had nobody to protect him anymore from being bullied. And my thing is like, if you want me to be honest, I don't feel bad. I really don't. I mean, my thing is I don't think anybody should be bullied for how they are, but at the same time, I'm not gonna stand there and stick up for somebody who stabbed me in the back whenever I gave them the utmost support that I could. Like, what he did was actually fucked up. And then I was getting made fun of because my boyfriend left me for a dude. Okay.
Me, 26 female, and my fiance, 28 male, have been together for 3 years. Our finances are split until after marriage, and we have equally paying jobs. He doesn't pay when we eat out, he doesn't pay for any fixes in our rental apartment, and he also doesn't help with furniture and stuff. I try to have conversations about how I'm always supposed to foot the bill for almost everything. His excuse is that he's been saving for a new apartment. Been saving up for 2 years now, but he still has half of his salary which he uses on himself and buys gadgets and gaming stuff. When I try to argue about it, he'd say it's his money after all and remind me of how he's saving up to buy an apartment for us. Days ago, he called me and asked if I'd take him to the hospital to treat his ankle. It's been hurting him for weeks now, but only now he decided to get it checked. I drove him there since he was in pain, but was surprised when he told me to pay the bill. I asked why not him, and he brought up the new apartment he's been saving for again. I had it, especially after he threatened to not add my name to the new apartment's title if I refused to help him out. I snapped and told him to pay for it himself and stop using my money with the apartment excuse that I left. He had to pay, but he was furious that I let him down in this time of struggle. Also said that my attitude wasn't partner material. I told him that I felt like he was using the new apartment to spend my money, but he said that I had no empathy or sense of responsibility to support him and help him out, when he is doing me a huge favor and buying me an entire freaking apartment. He's calling me selfish and negative. I don't know. I feel guilty for doing this now, and he's avoiding me entirely. Am I in the wrong for leaving the hospital after my fiance told me to pay the bill? My wife and I were invited to my brother's 31st birthday. He's single and lives alone in his apartment. So to give you a heads up, my wife and him don't get along so well, but can be civil enough to sit at the same table. So we went and had dinner and talked, and everything is going well. No argument until after my wife went up to use the bathroom. Later, my brother went to use the bathroom and then came back looking pissed. He kept giving me and my wife looks, but I didn't know what was going on until he pulled me aside before we left and told me that my wife had left her used pad in his bathroom. I was shocked and I didn't know what to say because this felt highly inappropriate. He said he didn't appreciate what my wife did and that it was a sign of disrespect towards him. I apologized profoundly and said that I didn't know about it. He asked me to speak to her or she wouldn't be welcome in his place anymore. We got in the car and I asked my wife about it. She nonchalantly said that there was nothing wrong with what she did and that my brother was being ridiculous. I kind of flipped and told her it was very inappropriate for her to leave her used pad in his place, even if it was in the bathroom and in the trash can, because it made him uncomfortable. She yelled, asking what she was supposed to do, and I told her that she could have taken it with her and threw it outside, not in his bathroom. That's my brother's place, and he told me how he felt about it. She yelled at me, calling my brother an incel and me an a-hole for getting in her face about it. She said she needed to use the bathroom, and it's not like the pad was visible since she dumped it in the trash can. At home, we still argued about it, and she kept calling me and my brother names. She's currently not speaking to me and is avoiding me entirely. Regardless, I feel like it's his place, and he gets to express what makes him uncomfortable with it. So, am I in the wrong for telling my wife that leaving her used pad in my brother's place was inappropriate?